Hey, all, everybody, and welcome to another full series spoilers edition of Dr. Candlepun's Lost podcast. In this episode, I will be discussing episode 13 of season 1, Hearts and Minds. And as always, I will be doing that while playing the episode on mute and basically sharing my thoughts throughout the duration of that episode. You do not necessarily need to watch along with me. If I'm talking about a specific scene that's on screen at a particular moment, I will do my best to make it clear what I'm referring to. That said, if you would like to watch along with me, I am pressing play now. And the first image is now on the screen. All right. So, I have a lot of comments today compared to normal. And I may, if I find that I'm lacking things to talk about, I may just start referring to those while this episode's still playing. I do know that something I'm looking forward to talking about in this episode is Boone's hallucination and all of the things that I feel actually indicate that the monster was involved in that legitimately, not that the monster part of Boone's experience was not, at least not entirely, a hallucination. Let's see. We're still in the recap of this episode, which, in the group discussion, Julia mentioned that she kind of saw, because the recap showed when Kate said, "Oh, your brother, if your brother's safe with anyone on this island, it's Locke," something to that effect. When Julia saw that in the recap, she immediately knew, like, okay, something bad's going to happen to Boone because of Locke. So yeah, again, don't love those recaps. I might actually start skipping those for the group discussions, unless we've been away. Like if we've been on hiatus for a while, then I'll let them play. But there was something else I was going to say. Oh, about the group discussion. I had been uploading pictures of Drew's cosplay to the beginning of those videos. Obviously, if you've seen the group discussion for Hearts and Minds, you'll see I didn't do that for this one, and that's just because him and I failed to touch base in time for me to get those added. But he has now sent them to me along with his cosplay for the next episode. So I will include those at the beginning of the next group discussion. So don't worry. He did, in fact, cosplay. I just did not get I just failed to get the photos in time. So we're in the flashback where Shannon's calling Boone and telling him she's in Australia. It's clear some kind of argument is happening. We talked in the group discussion about how Boone's form of saving Shannon, even if she was genuinely, like, even if she wasn't actually conning him, it seems like a very non-productive. I mean, the fact that it keeps happening, he's not actually helping her by just paying these guys off. Like whatever the issue is that causes her to keep going to these abusive guys, he's not caring enough to actually address that. Of course, what the underlying issue turns out to be is she's doing this on purpose and getting money, like ripping him off for money. But yeah, because it turned into a big point of conversation of like the healthiness or the good, just the goodness of Boone's feelings for Shannon. And yeah, I think the point that the episode's trying to make is that his feelings aren't healthy for him, and they don't really mean anything to Shannon. So yeah, I did really like Julia's theory on the hatch and the possibility of them being tunnels and tunnels that were perhaps built to navigate the island without having to fear the monster. Okay, I'm going to dive into a comment. Let's start with so Homo Sapiens 97 commented on our last group discussion, and he asked, did nobody notice that the deposit box had the same number as the plane? I would have loved to hear if anyone had any thoughts about that. Yeah, so actually Drew, who had seen the show, did point that out while Julia had been talking about, I can't remember the specific order that this happened in, and I cut this part out in the editing. I don't remember why. It might have been sometimes like there are moments of conversation where people are talking over each other and kind of interrupt each other, and then like it doesn't actually end up going any further. So if I had to guess, that's why I cut it out, was because it didn't actually lead to anything substantial, and it was probably hard to hear or understand. But essentially, as I recall it, Drew pointed out that the numbers were the same as the flight number, and the plane, Julia noted that, it was a toy plane, and they were in a plane crash. And she made kind of a joke about like, oh, Kate's a witch. We've got a psychic in the show already. Maybe Kate's a witch, and she somehow, took these elements and it caused the plane to crash or something. I mean, it's not terribly dissimilar from, what they establish in the next episode about Walt and what he does. But yeah, as far as I recall, that was the extent of the discussion regarding the numbers being the same. Obviously, this will probably come up on its own by the time we get to the numbers episode, and if it doesn't, I will obviously be pointing things out to the first-time viewers as far as instances of the numbers occurring, and the flight number being a prime example of that. I do. This is another episode that's not one of my favorites of season one. It's one of my least favorites, I would say. But watching it these past couple times, for the main podcast episode, and then as part of the group screening, I do think it's really well structured as far as like it's got all these subplots, but the way they kind of kick each other off is really interesting because you've got um, the Shannon Saeed thing, not really a subplot in this episode, but that kicks off the Boone issue and him wanting to tell Shannon, which of course leads into the whole main uh, plot. But then yeah, you have Hurley and his digestive issues. He's coming to Jack for advice. This gets Jack kind of, questioning why Locke and Boone haven't been bringing back Boar, which, triggers all of his scenes of him, kind of asking about Locke. And, he talks to Kate about it in the scene that just happened when Kate's showing him the garden. He talks to Saeed. He's like, oh, you saw Locke, when they're talking about the compass. And then, of course, yeah, he talks to Charlie, and then Locke himself. And this is really obviously kind of a crucial point in the... I mean, the first time Jack and Locke butt heads is obviously right after Claire's abducted, and I talked a lot about that when I did the commentary on that episode. But like that was much more of like a... they couldn't, they didn't see eye to eye on how to best respond to that crisis in that moment. This is kind of like the first episode where Jack starts to think, okay, well, maybe I should be concerned about this guy. And yeah, obviously, we know where that is headed. Or at least hopefully you do if you're hearing this. So yeah, now we're at the scene in the flashbacks where Boone arrives at Shannon's in Sydney, and she kind of shows the bruise on her head. Yeah, the group screening, kind of a long story, but we ended up in a room that we don't normally end up in, and it was a really awesome room. The only issue was that they didn't have a way for us to turn off all of the lights in that room, and there was one light that was positioned directly above the screen, and so like there was like this big glare on it, and yeah, that kind of sucked, and yeah, I was concerned that the group wasn't able to see the bruise, but fortunately they were. So yeah, the scene that's happening right now, Locke or Boone just said the line to Locke, like, "Look, man, you don't know her. She's smart and she's special in a lot of ways." And I love the way Locke like turns away from Boone, like almost like he's... It's almost like Locke is reading the feelings that Boone actually has for his sister, and yeah, the way Locke turns away from him is kind of like, okay, yeah. I'm gonna... I don't think I have anything to say about this initial scene of Boone being tied up, so I'm gonna move on. I've got a comment from Time Gentleman. There's actually multiple parts of this that I'm going to read out, and I think I'll do them. I don't think I'm going to do them all at once. So the question is, which one to start with? I guess I'll do this one. When it comes to opinions on Boone and Shannon as people, I think a big factor is age. Somerhalder is a few years older than Boone, and I think they're both written to act a few years younger than the characters actually are. I think if they had been, say, 19 and 20, I appreciate this might make them a little young for certain stuff, like living in France for a year, being a CEO, COO, etc. But cast to look at that age, it might have been easier for some to sympathize with them and their behavior. It's only a few years, but for me, the difference between 20 and 25 is a lot bigger than 30 and 35 in this context. Again, though, I'm sure they had many good reasons for not doing this. Well, I'm not sure this is what Ben meant there, but I definitely don't think that they're meant to be 30 and 35. In fact, I've been meaning to go back and double check this, but I believe they say that Shannon is 20 when Hurley's doing the census. I believe that's the age she says that she is. And so yeah, if she's 20 and he's 2 years older, then he's 22. God, I'm wanting to check that. I hate doing it live. Hold on, Shannon Rutherford. I bet if I pulled this up on Lostpedia, I bet it will tell me. It says her birthday is October of 1983. I'm not sure where they're getting that from. I mean, I'm not sure where they're getting October from, I should say. But yeah, that would mean at the time that he's taking the census, she probably did say 20, because I'm assuming it's early enough in October that she hasn't turned 21 yet. I'm not sure what the source is on October. But yeah, so I mean, that would mean that Boone would be 22 or 23, because in this episode he says that their parents got married. Actually, we're in that scene right now, so the subtitle should tell me what exactly, if I didn't miss it already. Yeah, I missed it already, but I'm fairly certain he said that they were 2 years apart when their parents got married. So yeah, he would be 22 or 23. So, I mean, that's still pretty close to what Ben was saying. But for me, the difference between 20 and 25 is a lot bigger than 30 and 35 in this context. Sorry. My point is they are between 20 and 25. And I think their characters make a lot of sense as far as like they were raised as rich kids. And I mean, obviously there's still an episode about Shannon where you kind of learn that she wasn't always like this, and you kind of find out why she became this way. All I'm trying to say is, I don't know. I think most audience members' opinions of Boone and Shannon are probably what the writers intended their opinions to be. And yeah, I don't know. We are now in the scene where Kate is talking to Sun, and then realizes that Sun can understand her. And so this is the perfect time to read another comment from Homo Sapiens 97, who says, I find it really interesting that Kate still lies to Sun even when she thinks that Sun can't understand her. He has another part of that comment, which I'm going to save because it's about something else. But yeah, I am actually really frustrated that I forgot to point that out. in both the main podcast episode and the group discussion, because I too this time around found that I did take mental note of that. I didn't put it down in my actual notes, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of thought about it like, obviously she's not doing it to deceive Sun because she doesn't realize that Sun can understand her. I think of it as like she gets to just tell a story, a story that she thinks sounds nice, and yeah, and you could also look at it as she's practicing, a story that she could tell if somebody else asks her at some point why she was in Australia. For me, I don't look at that scene quite that cynically. I mean, I think that makes sense, and I think Kate is that type of character that would prepare for something like that. But I don't know. It just seems more. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know why. Pleasant, upbeat. None of those are the right words, but something along those lines. Like, it just seems more hopeful or something like that. So yeah, I prefer to look at it as she gets to tell a nice story, and there's nothing malicious about it because Sun can't understand her anyways. Yeah. We are now in the scene where Locke has run into Sayid. Sayid's trying to make sense of the maps. I guess I will go on to the last part of that comment from Homo Sapiens 97. In it, he refers to, in the main podcast episode on this Lost episode, I introduced our new semi-recurring segment where I plan to kind of point out some translations of non-English languages that aren't subtitled in the show, and obviously with this one, I pointed out a lot of what Jin says to Hurley, but yeah, in that podcast episode, I talked about how I couldn't, how I hadn't thought of a name for the segment yet, and if you looked at the time codes, you'd see that I didn't. I left it blank for now because I still haven't thought of one. Anyways, so what Homo Sapiens said was, perhaps Lost in Translation would be a good name for the new segment. And yeah, the only reason, I mean, I agree, and the reason that I didn't want to go with that is because I know this sounds so stupid, but like, because there's already a Lost episode called In Translation, and it's meant to be kind of read as Lost in Translation. I try not to reuse stuff, be it stuff I've already used or that the show's already used. So I was trying to think of something somewhat clever or humorous that hadn't already been used at some point. That said, I mean, yeah, if I continue to not come up with something, I may well go with that. Because yeah, I mean, it's a pretty solid. It obviously gets to what it is I'm trying to do. Oh, so yeah, now we're in the scene where Boone and Shannon allegedly are hiding in the banyan tree, and you see the shadow come and go. I'm paying attention now because both my uncle and Brian in the group discussion said that they saw like a bright light, like the monster was emitting a bright light. And in both cases, I told them that I was pretty sure. And yeah, now that scene is over, and I stand by this now that I've just rewatched it again. I'm certain that what they were seeing is when the monster backs off, the light reemerges because it's not blocking it anymore. But it's just interesting that they both interpreted that as the monster was shining a light onto them. Yeah, just thought that was interesting. Now at the compass scene where Saeed's noting the anomaly, and I don't have a lot to say about this other than it's just a really cool, pretty early clue as to the electromagnetism of the island, and just another, all those people that would always say, like, oh, they were making up as they went along and all that stuff. It's scenes like this, like really simple ones, where it's just like, well, no. I mean, because why would they point that out if they didn't kind of know where they were going with that? Yeah. I'm going to move to another section of Ben's comment, where he says, I appreciate all the reasons why they didn't do this, but I always but I always thought it'd be cool if they had fully shown the monster when it killed Shannon as a big CG dinosaur type thing, knowing that they weren't actually committing to anything because it was a hallucination. That would have driven the viewers nuts. Yes. I also, now that you say that, I do kind of like that idea, but I can also appreciate why. I mean, like one reason why they may not have wanted to do that, aside from budgetary concerns, maybe. There's no way they could have done that without it looking ridiculous as hell. So I feel like, because we know what the monster looks like in the season 1 finale, and even it just being smoke, like it looks really bad in the first season. It looks a little better in season 2, but still not great. And then I think it gets gradually better from there. But yeah, my point is, like, if we know how bad the monster looks at the end of season 1, them trying, and it just being black smoke that looks that bad, if they tried to make something more complex, like a dinosaur or what have you, or hell, I don't know why I'm talking about the monster. Like, just think of the polar bear in the next episode, how bad that looks. Yeah, even if by the end of the episode you revealed that that's not actually what it was necessarily, I think in the moment before you got to the end of the episode, like, people would be super disappointed. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, so I think that's probably a big reason. I mean, assuming it even occurred to them to do that, because yeah, it very well may not have. That said, trying to decide if I want to go ahead and get into this or not, or if I want to wait till it's happening on screen, into my reasons. Well, yeah, okay. I mean, I can get into it, I think. So in the scene coming up, where Boone and Shannon are kind of, well, they're walking through the jungle, and then the monster reappears and seemingly kills Shannon. You can hear the bird wings flapping, which I mentioned a few episodes ago. You can hear the same sound before Sayid hears the whispers, and you hear it often before the monster starts roaring or appears or what have you. You hear it flapping, and then all of a sudden you see the tree get uprooted. But if you're looking closely, it actually looks like black smoke is erupting from underneath the tree, and that it's coming from underground, and that's why the tree gets uprooted. All of those things that I just said, all of that is behavior that we either have already seen or will continue to see in the future of what the monster does. Just the fact that it looks like black smoke. Boone has no way of knowing those things about the monster. And therefore, he surely is not the one conjuring that. Like it makes sense that he could hallucinate Shannon because he knows Shannon well enough to do that. It makes sense that his subconscious would be able to do that. But how would his subconscious be able to accurately conjure this behavior of the monster if he's never witnessed it? This, I think, is the biggest clue as to the fact that the monster is actually present. And furthermore, given what we eventually learn about what the monster is and what it's been up to and everything, and what it's capable of, I am actually certain, maybe too extreme a word, because I'm open to other people having a different interpretation of it, but I am fairly resolute in my interpretation that everything Boone is experiencing is being projected by the monster. Boone is under the influence of that drug. This makes him mentally susceptible to the Man in Black's psychic abilities and his ability to affect people's minds or mentally project things to them. Much like what we see in season 3 when Locke takes the drug and he sees the deceased Boone appear to him and give him this vision that leads him down this path to recommit to his faith in the island and all that. I have a whole video essay talking about why it seems evident to me that was the monster. I'll attach a link to that video in the description of this. But my point is that yeah, like, does it make sense that, or is it feasible that Boone is just genuinely hallucinating kind of exactly what Locke wanted him to, like Locke wants and has faith that by drugging Boone will have some kind of experience that will lead to him committing to Locke and moving past his issues with his sister. I feel like it could be interpreted as fairly convenient that is the exact type of experience that Boone has. That is, unless some conscious force is making that be the case. Like it's ensuring that that's the experience Boone has. And I know a lot of people will want to say, well, yeah, but that conscious force is the island. And I don't want to get into it again here, but I just, again, do completely disagree with the notion that an island, no matter how unique, no matter how geologically unique it is, I disagree with the idea that an island has a conscious will of its own. And I think the show goes out of its way to illustrate in the end that anyone that has had that interpretation of things has been manipulated by the Man in Black and has done horrible things in the name of that belief, this belief that the island has a will of its own. So for me, it comes down to the monster, who, again, we actually have very convincing evidence that it actually was present here. that being all the things that I mentioned, that you get to, if you're actually paying attention, we do glimpse the black smoke. Not only when it erupts from the tree, but when it scoops Shannon up. If you go through that frame by frame, at the top of the screen, you can actually see a sliver of the black smoke. And if Boone's never seen the monster, which we know he hasn't, what a coincidence that he has hallucinated this accurately. Hell, even what it did in the tree, like in the banyan tree, that's something that kind of happens later. I don't remember if it rams into it, but with Kate and Juliet in season 3, it stays on the outside of the tree. And yeah, in the pilot, it's not really the same either. Kate hides in the banyan tree, but we don't actually see that the monster gets near her. But yeah, the point is, yeah, see, there it just erupted from the bottom. I felt like I had one more thing to say about that, but well, so anyway, I mean, I know I've talked about it before, but if it was the monster, what would the motivation have been? And I also think that makes a lot of sense, and it is pretty cool. It wants Boone. It wants the same thing Locke wants, essentially. It wants Boone to commit to Locke's interpretation of things, and Locke is putting his blind faith into what he interprets as the will of the island. And if Locke believes in the island having this will and that he needs to serve it, then that's obviously something the Man in Black can and does later exploit. He actually exploits it quite a bit throughout the entire series, but even later this season, with the dream that leads them to the Nigerian Beechcraft, and that obviously leads to Boone's death. It makes it more satisfying for me that we're literally seeing the first step of that plan to get Boone killed. We are seeing that here in this episode, 6 episodes before that plan ever falls. Yeah. But again, it's not one of those things where, like, I am fairly resolute in that being my interpretation for all the reasons I'm saying, but I just think it makes more sense and is more satisfying than the alternative. That said, it's an example of one of my interpretations where I fully acknowledge there's no concrete evidence to disprove, that it was all conjured by Boone. So anybody that would say, well, I don't want to interpret it as the monster projected this experience to Boone. It's one of those things where I would never say, well, you're wrong. It's definitely open to interpretation. There's definitely room to read it either way. But yeah, it is just me explaining why I like it. The last part of, well, not the last part, but another part of Ben's comment that I haven't read yet is in relation to, like, in the group discussion, and I think in the main podcast episode, I talked about the the title of the episode being Hearts and Minds, and how that term is generally used in reference to propaganda and somebody trying to get people on board with whatever agenda they're pushing. And I talked about how, I'll just read Ben's comment. He says, good point about the episode title reflecting Locke's possible motivations. I think I even used the phrase a while back when I commented about the first sinister shot of Locke watching Walt, that that it feels like a bit of a cheat unless you want to interpret it as suggesting that he made the dog whistle to gain Walt and Michael's allegiance for some vague pro-island cause that hasn't fully coalesced in his mind yet, but which he sees himself as leading. So yeah, the main point there being that that Ben even used the term hearts and minds when talking about Locke's possible motivations all the way back at the beginning of the season. And yeah, I don't know if that's why that may have subconsciously been some part of the reason that I was thinking that about this episode. I want to say that it's occurred to me before that may be what the episode title was referring to. Like, it wasn't this watch that it first occurred to me. But I could be wrong, because I do know it was a fairly recent realization. Like, it was within my last few rewatches that occurred to me. So yeah, it may well have been a factor. We are pretty much at the end of the episode. And yeah, this is actually this clip of Boone realizing that it was a hallucination. In the group discussion, I obviously included a bit. I included the reaction that Julia and Brian had to that moment, because I thought it was a good one. And so because of that, I wanted to read part of Jerry Badine's comment. Once again, I know I've said this before when I've read one of his comments. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. But he was commenting on the idea of doing these commercial breaks the way that we have been these last two group discussions. We've paused it where the commercials would have been and talked about just that section of episode for a few minutes. So yeah, what Jerry Badine said is, I like it this way. If you put the episode image on top and made it a full-on reaction video, that'd be cool. But I also like this. Yeah. So that possibility occurred to me. I wouldn't say that I considered it too strongly. The reasons that I don't love reaction videos. I mean, like, I certainly don't go out of my way to watch them. Because to me, and this could be my own cynicism, but like, it always feels like there's a lack of authenticity to the reactions. Like, if you know that you're being recorded and that you're putting out content where people are supposed to enjoy your reaction, it always feels to me like, just inherently on some level, that's going to be forced. Like, oh, I need to react in some kind of dramatic or entertaining way, and I don't want the people being filmed to have that motivation. I want them to react genuinely, is what I'm saying. And as you saw in this last group discussion, sometimes that can be entertaining, and if that occurs, I will gladly put that into include that in the podcast episode, which of course really only works for the video version. Yeah, this is the thing. The group discussions, really, I really hope there aren't a lot of people listening to the audio only versions of those, because I feel like they're really hard to track, since there's more people. But also, yeah, when I do stuff like that, where I show people's reactions to stuff, it's not going to translate to the audio only version. But yeah, back to the point. Yeah, the way that people have been reacting to stuff, I mean, it would be to release an entire 43 minutes of them watching the episode in its entirety, we're so far all the episodes we've watched, there's not a whole lot of entertaining moments. Like there's been some laughter where you'd hope there'd be laughter, although sometimes there hasn't. Like sometimes like jokes haven't elicited an audible response. Yeah, there just hasn't been a lot of entertaining reactions so far. That said, yeah, what I like about recording the commercial break version, like we have been, is it gives me an excuse to leave the camera running without them having any expectation that them watching the episode is going to end up uploaded anywhere. And therefore, if they have a reaction, it will be purely motivated by their genuine emotion in the moment. So yeah, as we get deeper into the series and more shocking things happen, I am very much looking forward to getting some more of those. But yeah, even if I uploaded as like a bonus thing, just for anybody that happened to be interested in watching them watch the whole episode, I feel like that would just kill. I feel like that would negatively impact the channel in the YouTube algorithm, because I feel like there wouldn't be a lot of people that would watch that in its entirety. Maybe some people would check it out and skip to certain parts, but I feel like it would be another example of a video going up that wouldn't actually get a lot of views or a lot of watch time, and I feel like that would further negatively impact the channel. So yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do that. But yeah, again, if there are good reactions, I'm going to try and include them in the podcast, in the group discussion episodes. And the last, well, so sorry, we're long past the credits here, so I'm going to do my credits real quick, and then I'm going to read the last part of Ben's comment. So I want to give a special thank you to candidate number 90, Ben Ward, candidate 108, Jeffrey Winslow, candidate 69, Brian Phillips, candidate 32, Chuck Boyd, and candidate 341, Hans. I would also like to give a thank you to the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources used in the production of this podcast. This includes Mary Mullins, Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, Charlene McMinn, and William McMinn. And the last part of Ben's comment says, regarding fan mail, could you post your upcoming recording schedule again? Maybe as a community post so it's easier to find and reference. That would certainly encourage me to send in more episode-specific questions. Yeah, so that's a good idea, because yeah, the last time I posted our estimated schedule was a few months ago, and because of weather and getting COVID, that has already been significantly altered. So yes, sometime in the next week I will do that. I will upload it. I will update our estimated schedule for the rest of the season. And I'll put that up as a community post on the channel. That said, what I can tell you now is the next episode we will be recording, my uncle and I, will be this Wednesday, the 22nd. And that episode will be Outlaws. So yeah, if you guys have any thoughts, questions, opinions, what have you, about the Outlaws episode that we could address on that podcast episode, feel free to comment them here, or you can email them in to dr.candlepun@gmail.com. If you email, you can send in audio or video messages as well, and we can edit them into the podcast. But yeah, as far as the schedule beyond this week, I will post a community post. Okay, I think that's it. There was something I wanted to say that I didn't say earlier. I was thinking maybe I could save it for the next commentary just so that I have more to talk about, but it's really not relevant to that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it in at the end here. But something that I found amusing in our group discussion is when Julia was talking about how this is the second fake out death we've had. You know, we had Charlie at first when it seems like he's dead, but then Jack manages to bring him back. And then this episode obviously fakes you out with Shannon's death. And she was saying that she's going to be pretty pissed if the next one turns out to be another fake out. And obviously, if you're listening to this, hopefully you know the next one is Boone, and no, that one sticks. And if you've been listening to the group discussions, you know that she is absolutely obsessed with Boone, and you also probably picked up on how emotionally distressed she was in this episode, thinking that Shannon died and being worried about how things emotionally affected Boone. All of this is to say, I am like both. I'm like really looking forward to Julia's reaction, but also like kind of dread seems like an extreme word, but yeah, I'm also a little apprehensive about how she might be upset with me. Because yeah, she said things in the past about she's under the impression that Boone is a very significant character throughout the run of the show, and I'm not sure how she ended up under that impression, but I've obviously done nothing to dispel it. And so yeah, I think she's in for a pretty big shock with that, and I'm excited for the emotional reaction of that too. Like that sounds like kind of a twisted thing to say. But yeah. There was another thing she said too about it wasn't on the air, it was before we started recording, but when we watched the episode where Jack saves Charlie, like right after it ended, she was saying like, yeah, I know main characters have to start dying at some point, but I was just thinking like anybody but Charlie. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm just waiting to be like, well, you said, you said anybody but Charlie. Anyways, so yeah. Okay, I think that's all I've got for this one. So when this is being released, it won't be too long before the main podcast episode on Special comes out. And then there will be a few weeks hiatus before our main podcast episode on Homecoming. But in between those, you'll have the group discussion on Special and one of these spoilery commentaries on that episode. So yeah, I hope you guys will come back for any and or all of that. And until then, as always, namaste and good luck.